Okay, welcome to our second vlog. This is the University of Wolverhampton Doctoral College vlog. I'm Deborah Puritan and I'm a Research Development Manager at the University of Wolverhampton.
And I'm Ben Halligan, I'm Director of the Doctoral College.
This vlog that we're going to talk about today is about managing your supervisors, and I think this is one of the things that we get asked quite a lot from PhD students about. What is a respectful interaction with a supervisor, but one that's productive and moves a PhD forward, and whose role is it to move that PhD forward? So Ben, what would your advice be?
I think people make the assumption that their supervisors are fully aware of what you, the individual PhD student, is up to, where you are in your PhD journey, what you're doing with your time. And in fact, you may be one of a dozen PhD students they're dealing with, plus they have all of their other duties, research, conferences, different countries and so forth. So I think you can never assume that they know exactly where you're up to. Yeah. And one way that this comes out is that often you'll get some writing from a postgraduate to look at, and it's quite confusingly presented. And you're thinking, well, hang on, I've read all of this stuff already. And then when you check with them, they go, no, you've already read this. It's just the bit at the end here, then this new bit, and then over the page there's something else, but that's just notes, so don't treat that too seriously. And in next to no time, you're really confused as to what you're doing and so on. So I think that it's very important to begin with a supervision session, to begin with a summary. The last time we did this, and I sent you this draft, and you gave me this feedback, and I'm aiming for the next draft, for the next one, and I'm aware that I'm 2 months away from the end of this year, and by then the agreed goal is I'll have completed this work and so on. So all the time you're reiterating the timeline and you're keeping the supervisor informed and on track and up to date and so forth.
I think probably that links into expectations, and I think it's really important to set expectations, both from the position of the supervisor and from the student's position. So it's kind of negotiating those rules of engagement with each other, how this PhD is going to operate, what the student expects from the supervisor and what the supervisor expects from the students. And there's quite a lot of work around pre-expectations of undergraduate degrees, but we don't know a lot about pre-expectations of postgraduate degrees. And everybody comes in with so much experience as postgraduate researchers that it's hard to make generalisations. So I think it's really important to have those discussions right at the very beginning of a PhD about what is expected of each other, how you're going to work, what the ground rules of the relationship are going to be. And those are going to differ. Every PhD student and supervisor interaction is unique, so those have all got to be negotiated and will operate differently for each unique set of people involved in it. It's a professional relationship, so I don't expect my PhD students to come to my house, which some have. Particularly when I was off work poorly, a couple of them turned up and brought me flowers, which was lovely. But that's not expected. I expect my students to turn up to meetings on time. I expect them to meet the goals that they set, because I let them set the goals. So if they set a goal for handing in a piece of work, I expect them to meet that. However, I'd like to know what they're expecting of me. And as you say, in the previous blog, everybody works differently, so it's got to be a negotiation about how people work and how we work together.
I think when you have an engagement with your supervisor, it's a good idea afterwards to email them straight away and to say, okay, let's summarise what was agreed.
Yep.
And at the supervision meeting to actually get some dates as well, so that if they ask you to do something, you say, well, I'll aim to get this to you by a certain date. And then will I be able to meet you a week later, 2 weeks later, in order to get some feedback on what I've done? Or I'd like to meet you then to get a bit more support or a bit more advice, so that you know, and they know the goals that you're then heading towards. And there may be some slippage, and that's fine, that's to be expected. At the same time, your supervisor may be out of the country for a bit, they may go on holiday, they may have endless other calls on their time, and it's important to be able to work around that. Never to get to the point where you've done a load of work, submitted it, to discover that your supervisor's away for a month and a half, and you have to wait for that time in a way, obviously that's an unusual situation. You have a second supervisor who can pick up things in that circumstance. With the email then that you send, it often can be very useful aid memoir to yourself.
Yes.
That you've agreed this, you talked about that, you thought more reading was needed here, more experimentation was needed here, the longer term goals are this, and when you look back on these communications, it summarises for you the year of your research journey. It's a bit of a research diary, and that's terribly useful as well.
I think it's really important with those emails to make sure that you CC in all of your supervisory team. So if you've got more than one supervisor, who everybody knows what communications are passing between the supervisors. And I think if you've got a supervisor who hasn't been able to make a meeting for a particular reason, making sure that they're CC'd into those meeting notes as well is a good way of bringing them up to speed with what was discussed. The other thing that I would add to that is also if there's anything that's getting in the way of you meeting deadlines, or you continuing with your Ph.D. at this particular time, or your doctorate at this particular time, is that you need to be open and communicate those to your supervisors, because they can often help. If it's to do with not really knowing how to do things or how to move forward, if it's about feeling stressed or anxious about the Ph.D., they may be able to help put your mind at rest. If it's things that are external factors that are getting in the way of your doctorate, then they'll be able to advise you what the processes are within the university to help stop the clock. So at Wolverhampton, you can take a leave of absence, and that will stop the clock on your PhD. And I know that's not the same for every university. Not every university actually stops the clock. But at Wolverhampton we do. So it is really important that you do talk through issues with your supervisors and be open with them, because if they don't know what's going on and you're not meeting deadlines and you're not meeting targets, they have a duty of care to actually place you at proceed with caution. So you don't want them to do that. If they know that there's a reason for it, they can help you either take a leave of absence or find the right support in the organisation to help you through that particular situation.
I think, in a way, there will be moments when you'll be meeting with your supervisors fairly often. I mean, it depends on the discipline, but it can be that you would see them on a daily basis in the labs or on a weekly basis. Maybe at the beginning of a new part of the PhD, you might need line-by-line elements of feedback. But conversely, there'll be periods where you don't need to meet them very often at all. For full-time postgraduate researchers, we ask they have at least one formal monthly engagement. But I think that there'll be periods when you're doing field work, where you're just pressing on, where you really don't need to see them. And at that point, it's always good to drop them an email just as a polite progress update.
In those situations, I always still like to see my students, because they will be doing work. It's just nice to know how they're doing with that work and how they're getting on with it. And even if it's just, a 10-minute Skype call or a 10-minute coffee in the coffee bar, just to touch base, I think that is still really important. So I don't know about you, but I still like to have those meetings with my students.
I think so, and I think one thing I will note is that sometimes postgraduate research confuses having a meeting with you for doing work, and it really is not. And if they turn up to chew the fat with you, that's not progressing the PhD sometimes.
I wouldn't say that my meetings with students
Oh,
are about
in your
chewing the
case,
fat. I think it's about, where are you, how are you doing, even if it's just to say, yeah, I'm still playing through that literature review. I've done another 4,000 words on it, I'm really pleased with it. I've been reading this, I've been reading that. That's what I'm interested in.
I mean, that sounds really ideal. I mean, I've found in my experience sometimes that the researcher who's not getting anything done will come and see me all the time.
Yeah.
And the researcher who's getting a load done will see me infrequently. And I wish I could somehow reverse that. And I think sometimes it's a panic reaction that they feel that by seeing me, I have the impression as the supervisor that they're hard at work. But seeing me is not being hard at work, if you see what I mean.
So then that asks a question, really begs the question, that as supervisors, what can we do in those situations? What would we be expected to do? And for me, if they weren't making progress, I'd be asking the questions about why that is. Is it because they don't feel that they have the skill set to get on with the job that they need to do? So then we'd be looking at a CPD plan. All students should have a CPD plan right from the very beginning. So we'd be looking at that and readdressing that, trying to find some workshops that would help support the development of the researcher, or looking at what's going on at home that's getting in the way, perhaps looking at sort of some of the techniques that we talked about in the previous blog, which was around managing your time. Is it a time management issue? What do you need? Or is it that just that for some students needs a little bit more of a directive approach right at the very beginning? I think as supervisors, we naturally go in with a directive approach, but then we scare students as we withdraw that directiveness and move into the kind of the more sort of sounding board stage where we're expecting them to take over and be in charge of their research and leading their research. And sometimes that's when people start to fall apart and kind of not know how to move on. But sometimes we have to take a step back as a supervisor and go back into that directive approach, if that makes sense.
Yep, I think so.
So one of the areas that I think we get questions about a lot is what should you do if there are issues in your supervision and you're not getting on with your supervisors?
I think in that case you would perhaps need to address whether you're not getting on because there's a differing set of understanding of what the work should be. I mean, often a postgraduate researcher will have a very firm idea of what they want to do, but the supervisor has a different idea. And I think that can be the root of some tension. And I think it's often a matter of sitting down with the whole supervision team, which will include at least 2 supervisors, if not more, and then coming to an agreed understanding. And then locking that in by sending an email afterwards and saying, just to summarise, this is where we are, this is what we've agreed. At other times it can be around, I think, a sort of professionalism of behaviour. And I think that if you treat the supervision session as a professional interaction, then it can help the supervisor to understand that you're there looking for an agreed range of areas of work that you will then complete before the next supervision session. Whereas if you're not sure and you just talk for a bit and you come away thinking, what am I doing now? Then whatever tensions there are can grow greater.
I think sometimes the PGRT can help in that. So at the University of Wolverhampton, we have a postgraduate research tutor that when things get to a point where you feel it's untenable, the postgraduate research tutor can often step in and mediate. But for the postgraduate researcher, they can go and talk to that postgraduate research tutor and get some advice on how they might reapproach communication with their supervisors if they're having, or they feel that they're having some issues.
Yeah, so there are pastoral care figures. And in fact, it may be, if those issues that you're having are related to external circumstances, it may be easier to divide things and to deal with the external circumstances, family or illness or what have you, with a pastoral tutor, and then keep your supervisors strictly for academic engagements, because otherwise I think if you mix everything into one it can become just a bit too much. But at the same time, I think that you need to in a way negotiate with your supervisors expectations around how the work will progress. And the supervisor can be frustrated because they feel the student's not progressing the work. And the student can be frustrated because they feel the supervisor doesn't understand the work. And that's a recipe for really nothing happening. They're not progressing it because they're not sure what direction it's going in. And then as far as the supervisor is concerned, because they're not sure what direction they're heading in, the student's unable to progress the work. So it's often about communication, I think.
And I think it's about having that open communication. I think some of the issues that, particularly if I was giving advice to supervisors, sometimes where the issues get a little bit sticky is where supervisors have a vested interest in the piece of work that the student's doing, and they want it done in a particular way. Often this is when students come in on a studentship, and a piece of work can go in a number of different directions, and still with the studentship we would be expecting the student to take ownership of that piece of work. And there's kind of sometimes a little bit of decoupling that needs to go on around, you know, a PhD student isn't a research assistant. A research assistant or a postdoc will deliver a piece of research in a particular way under your direction, whereas a PhD will deliver their piece of work under your supervision. And we kind of need to understand the difference as supervisors.
Because ownership ultimately is with the postgraduate research student. This is the person who will be vivaed, who will be awarded the PhD. And I think that as you progress on your PhD, it's often about taking full control of the PhD. And part of that will be creative, constructive differences with your supervisor. That's quite natural. If they didn't exist, you would just turn into a smaller version of your supervisor. And you know, no one really wants that. We have to advance the fields we're researching. So the expectation is some tensions may occur, and maybe the researchers shouldn't be so concerned about these things. And of course, mistakes will be made. You know, you will go in a certain direction, and then the data you get back maybe disproves your thesis or is not proving it in the way that you want. And I think you need to build in time to review things and to pull back and to continue in a way that seems informed and correct. And your supervisor is there to help and to guide, but not to impose his or her view on what you're doing and then say off you go and do it. They have an overarching concern, but they're not necessarily doing a day-to-day management.
To conclude, whose responsibility is the PhD for progress? Is it the PhD or the doctoral student? Is it the supervisors, or is it an interaction between the two?
My head says it's the student's responsibility and ownership, but my heart says it's an interaction between the two. Have I failed that question?
No, I would say exactly the same. I think students do need to have responsibility for progressing the work, but I think as supervisors we're supposed to be there as the guide, you know, the hand, the head and the book. So the helping hand, actually it's the hand, the boot and the book actually. So it's the helping hand, the boot of the bum when they're not doing the work.
And the
book to help. You know.
So there we are. Some ideas on how you manage your supervisors.
Okay, so that concludes our second blog, and thank you very much.